What's going on, everybody? Hope you are having a wonderful week so far. Before I start, I say it every week, please subscribe. Please give us a review if you like it, and please share it with your friends if you like the podcast. It just makes sure that the podcast keeps going and we can keep doing more and more episodes. And hopefully we can get bigger and bigger guests for you all. So, podcast time this week, the one and only Ben Malone. Ben is a radio DJ, a club DJ, a producer, and also a record A&R. He is an A&R for Armada Records, Armada Music. He is a DJ at Kiss FM, has a Friday night show, 11 p.m. till 1 a.m. He also does a Tomorrowland radio show. He does a lot, and I've been looking forward to getting him on for a while. So we talk a lot about record labels, we talk about new music, we talk about how radio shows work, etc., etc. It's a really interesting one. Very wide spectrum of podcast. Lot to learn and some good conversation. So without further ado, Ben Malone. Mr. Ben Malone, what's cooking, man?
How you doing, Will? You're right.
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm going to actually turn you up a little bit because you're coming in a bit. There we go, talk.
That better?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's better, man.
Wicked.
What's going on, man?
I'm good. Kind of just getting back into the swing of things now.
Yeah, I want to say Happy New Year, but we're kind of lying because technically this is coming out in the new year and it's actually like...
I was going along with it.
You were going along with it. It's the 20th of December. We can't be fake. We'll get caught out. Somebody's going to find out. But yeah, Happy New Year. Fake Happy New Year. New Year, new me and all of that.
Exactly.
How many people have you seen say that yet on their Instagram?
Yeah, quite a few. It's building up. So everyone's kind of doing the December regret. They're like, December's been so busy. I'm going to be a hermit in January. I'm not going to drink. I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm one of those people. But yeah, definitely everyone's kind of gearing up for January.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember like pre-COVID, it was like every year you'd get like everybody would be like, next year's my year, blah, blah, blah. And now I think everyone's just a bit nervous for what's to come. So it's like
bitten before.
Yeah, it's like people are a little bit more chill to like say really positive stuff. It's quite funny. How's the year been for you then, man?
Do you know what? It's been great. It's been carnage. I feel like this year was kind of the first full year that we returned to maybe potentially even busier than pre-COVID, if not as busy as pre-COVID. And it's just been kind of everything from events through to kind of, I think dance music has kind of properly found its feet again in terms of the club stuff. Yeah. So it's been a wicked year, and I feel like the whole industry is in a hell of a lot of a better shape now than it was this time last year. Yeah,
totally. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and this year feels like a blur, but I actually think this time last year we were hanging out.
Yeah, it would have been about this.
That was like the first time we actually met. I think this week. That's crazy.
Weird.
I only just remembered that. Good times. I'm sober, but everyone was messy as fuck, and I
was messy as fuck. That's my kind of lasting memory of seeing you there, being like, I'm really pissed,
really hammered. There was a bunch of us. You know, Dom from Labour Works.
Yeah,
we were eating bagels off Brick Lane at like 2:00 in the morning.
That's a sign of a good night.
Quality night.
When you're in that Brick Lane bagel shop.
Quality night.
Been a good night.
And then I had to look after Amy. Oh, it was just a messy night. It's good fun though. It's good fun. Yeah, man. It's everything's been crazy this year, and it feels. I don't know. Obviously, this isn't for everybody, and like we're in very fortunate situations with what we do and kind of how our careers have kind of grown over post-COVID, right? It seems to have been 2023 seems to be kind of 2022. Fucking hell, seems to be like a crazy year for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's just been like. I think because we wanted this year for so long, right? We wanted a year where we had the full 12 months to kind of work on every different part of the year. We didn't really kind of have any restrictions anymore. And then that was kind of from every level, from like a production point of view, you could just do sessions with whoever you wanted.
Yeah.
You could travel to go and see people wherever you wanted. From a DJing point of view, you could play any shows. You don't have to get a vaccine certificate or wear a mask to go to play your gigs.
I tell you what, though, I played in Spain this weekend, and you still have to fucking wear a mask on the planes to Spain.
Oh, I had that. I went to Ibiza about a month ago now, and they were still like pushing that. I was like, "Are you mad?"
Yeah, I was like,
"How? How does this make sense? We're literally all gonna get off the plane and go hang out in a club together. Like, it's the same people. Like,
everyone's got flu anyway at the moment. It's
We're
like
all ill,
we're all fucking sick. Just like, come on, spread it. Yeah, it's mad. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you though. It's been a good one. It's been a really good one. Like, looking back, it's been, fortunate, man. I was just before this podcast, I was sat down and was like, okay, let me do like 5 minutes of research into Ben Malone, because I thought I was correct in what I thought of like everything you do. You're still at Kiss, right?
correct. Yes, I do Friday nights there.
Friday nights at Kiss.
Yep.
Obviously you DJ and produce, and you're also A&R for Armada.
Correct. Yes. And I also do radio for Tomorrowland.
Okay, cool. I didn't know that. So that's the first one I didn't know. Like, you wear a lot of hats in this industry and kind of have a lot of influence, I guess, as of such. And I kind of want to go into how you manage all of that without it kind of crossing over and one getting in the way of the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think firstly it all stemmed from radio, was where it all began.
Yeah.
And everything else has kind of grown out from there. And I actually kind of, what I like about it all is it kind of complements each other, a lot of it.
Yeah.
So it started with radio. So I was originally, my first job in radio, I was a producer at Rinse. Mm-hmm. Then I went and did a show at a station called Represent in Brixton. And then a few years later joined Kiss.
Yeah.
And at that time I was working in like an office job full time.
Yeah.
Kind of, 9 to 5 in it and doing the radio and the DJing on the side. Mm-hmm. And it was at that point when I got the Kiss gig that I thought, I know I want to do this. This is the career I want to take.
Yeah.
I wasn't producing or anything at that time. So it was always kind of like radio is my thing.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, well, why don't I get a job in the industry rather than getting a job in an office, kind of doing something else. So as part of being a Kiss DJ, you kind of get the opportunity to go and meet a lot of the labels and the teams behind the records, to get pitched songs and stuff. That's how I know people like Billy from Another Rhythm, and therefore Amy. And then also I met a guy called Phil, who's A&R at Armada. And then Armada at the time only really had a couple of people in the UK, and they decided they wanted to grow out their UK office, so they were looking to hire a team. So I kind of got into Armada through that. And in a weird way, A&R and radio shows are very similar.
Very similar, yeah.
Because your job is to select music that you like, that you think other people will like, and that you think has some kind of unrealized potential.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of similarities there, and obviously, it's a bit of a proven route. You've got Pete Tong, who obviously one of the greatest broadcasters of all time, and of course is very much involved in label world. Yeah. But people like Anton Powers at Kiss as well. Yeah. Heavily involved in label world as well. So that was kind of where it all began, and then the production stuff that came with lockdown.
Just kind of hand in hand as well, right?
Yeah, I'd always been interested in it, but I'd never had the time or never had the kind of opportunity to sit down and actually get stuck into it. Yeah. And it got to the point where a lot of, particularly at Kiss, a lot of the guys are producers originally turned radio DJs. Yeah. Whereas kind of I was coming at it from a different angle, and I just thought, right, well, there's an opportunity here to kind of get involved with this scene. Yeah. So I took that on last. I think that will always be the smallest part of my career. Yeah. I enjoy it a lot. I love releasing music. I love the feeling you get releasing music and playing your records out. But it's not how I got into this industry. Yeah. And it's not... if people ask me, what do? I say, I'm a radio DJ and an A&R, and I do some production.
Yeah.
I would never say I'm a producer. Like,
Well, I think this is the thing, isn't it? It's like, with no disrespect, but like, even to become a radio DJ, even to become an A&R, it takes time. You have to get good at it.
Yeah.
It takes time. It's the same as production. It takes time. And it's like, you're at the point in your career, you're successful in where you're at because you've put the time and effort into it. And if you put the time and effort into being a producer, that's going to, your other side of the career isn't going to kind of carry on and keep growing.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And there just isn't the time in the day to kind of be master of all of all things. And
there's just nobody, I just don't see any value in it. I think I see huge value in doing multiple things. And I think like, I kind of want to talk about that as well. But like, I think there comes a point when you have to be focused on one thing. And then once that one thing is nailed, you can then move on to do other things, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. But you got to kind of focus on something, especially when we're kind of still relatively young in our careers, you know, in the global scale of things.
Yeah, massive. Well, if you look at like, especially in your situation, you look at like Tong, like how, well, let's look at like Annie Nightingale.
Yeah.
Like, how old is she?
Yeah. It's like,
I got to Google this.
I think it's knocking on 80,
80,
right?
yeah. Annie Nightingale.
That's my guess.
Age. Jesus, she was a presenter in 1970. Oh, she's 82.
Yeah. Crazy.
So anybody that's listening that doesn't know Annie Nightingale is, I'd say, the oldest presenter in the world. I'd guess so.
She's got to be, especially on a youth radio station, essentially.
And her show is absolutely amazing on Radio 1.
I think she was the first female DJ on Radio 1.
Was she? Amazing.
I think she was the first female broadcaster, so she's kind of got a massive significance in broadcasting world.
That makes sense. Yeah, she's huge. Yeah. That's amazing to think about that.
Yeah.
I bet she's got some stories.
I bet she knows where the skeletons are buried.
Literally. Because especially back then, like, radio was like different back then. Especially Radio 1, the power of the BBC back then was just crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, obviously there's been all sorts of stuff that has come out in the last few years about BBC buildings and what hasn't gone on in those buildings. And you know, the whole landscape was totally different. Yeah. Radio 1 was the only option, as opposed to, you didn't have Spotify, you didn't have, you know, you didn't even have CDs, I don't think, back then.
Well, it's really interesting, the radio culture in the UK generally, right? And if you compare it to anywhere else, like, you might know a little bit more about me than me, but I know like the Netherlands has like a bit of a radio culture. Yeah. But you go to America, you have a radio culture, but it's very much hip hop based. Now it is anyway, nowadays. Like in Detroit, you back in the day, you used to have like more, you'd have like a show that was electronic based. New York, I believe, you used to have like one show that was more like electronic dance based, but like nothing like England, where you have, well, growing up for me, it was like, you had Kiss, you had Vibe, which was Kiss kind of during that time, Radio 1, but you had Rinse, and then you had all the pirate stations that were just around. There's pirate stations everywhere. And then Capital, kind of, but no one really listened to Capital at the time. Capital was very commercial at that time.
Yeah.
But Radio 1, like, Radio 1 and Kiss were the ones at that time, and you just like listen all the time, and there'd always be some sort of dance music at some point in the day, and then you have the Friday night, Saturday nights. It's amazing what British culture or the influence that radio had in British culture.
Definitely, and it's so much stronger here than I think, particularly the US, but also just across Europe. You mentioned Netherlands. The Netherlands is good for dance radio. Obviously, dance music has a big home there.
Yeah.
You go to, well, you take the kind of shows that we view as a traditional radio show, especially your kind of headline ones, your Annie Mac, your Danny Howards, your Majestics on Kiss and stuff. That kind of hosted, personality-driven, tastemaker radio. It's just not really a thing across most of Europe. Like it's kind of mix shows and DJ mixes just kind of being broadcast out on the air. And there's definitely not the kind of same emphasis on this person is they're not a producer, they're just a broadcaster.
Yeah.
Like, Annie Mac, I think, is the best example of someone who never really got involved with anything else. I'm a broadcaster, I make great radio.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that and her reputation obviously is now global, worldwide. She's got festivals, she's done gigs, she's done her own events and stuff. That is all based on radio originally. And I don't think that you have that kind of culture across Europe. And the US it's totally different. Yeah, like you said. Like, it's the thing I find difficult with the US is they don't have like a Radio 1. They don't have like one big station that just everyone goes to. No. It's like it's all localized, it's all regional.
Yeah.
It's all genre specific because dance music is still relatively so small compared to like rap, but also like country and western and stuff out there, that they don't have that kind of like. So Kiss and Radio 1, obviously in the daytime these days, it's like pop music or crossover commercial stuff.
Playlisted.
Yeah, playlisted stuff. But then at night you get your specialists.
Yeah.
I don't think they have that same kind of setup out there.
I don't think as much. You got Sirius XM, obviously, which is kind of not radio to a certain extent. It's like kind of like streaming Spotify. But I think the issue is the size of America. It's like 350 million people.
Giant.
Like, I just don't think you can please that many people on one station. Whereas the UK, although I know we have like Radio 1, the demographic is like, I think it's 13 to like 25 technically. I think that's
it's supposed to be.
Yeah, it's like, which the way the BBC works, and it would be interesting to see how you guys work at Kiss, but I think the way the BBC work is that's why they kind of change their presenters quite regularly, because it's a license payer radio. So it's like it has to be kind of advertised, or it has to be for the demographic. And I think if we're talking that demographic, which is technically younger than us, but everyone's kind of listening to the same music, and we go to the clubs and we're all listening to the same music, and it's kind of like, whereas I think if you look at America, it's so vastly different. Many different, we're very multicultural in the UK, but I think it's just we're so similar as well.
Yeah.
Whereas in the US, I think it's very much more like, I could be massively wrong as well, but it just feels like there's huge pockets of the US where you listen to this and you listen to that and you listen to this and you listen to that, and then you don't go listen to this and you don't go listen to that. It's kind of strange. But I think also the way the radios are set up, like, to be successful on radio in America is very different to becoming successful as an artist on radio in the UK and Europe. Like, you need serious money to get your record to radio.
It becomes a financial thing. And but the behind the scenes of UK radio is relatively straightforward. Tracks are added to daytime rotation based on things like Shazam's, streaming data, and like just passion from the kind of key people at radio stations. There's no, you can hire someone called a radio plugger whose job it is to help you get a record on the radio, but ultimately there's no exchange of money for radio airplay.
That we know of.
That we know of.
Wink,
that
wink.
we know of. But
yeah, totally.
Generally speaking, in kind of my experience, that's very much how it works here. But in the US, it is commercialized. Like, there are certain stations that you can just pay for airplay.
Yeah.
And I think it's still curated to a certain degree by the stations, but you're kind of you're buying airtime like an ad almost.
Pretty much. You're talking like six figures to get your record to radio, like to high street. We're not talking Sirius XM, we're talking like mainstream radio.
Yeah.
And I think that's the amazing thing with the UK radio culture, is that we can have like this obscure dance record that just seems to pop off in the clubs. Everyone's Shazamming it, and then there we have it. We've got a number one in the UK that's a club record or a dance record that no one really would have knew about. if you know what I mean. And it's happened massively amounts this year. Like you had I think it was this year, Ewan McVicker, you had Dance LF System,
Eliza Rose
and
TikTok.
Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And the Eliza Rose one's an even stranger one to me because it's like 145 BPM.
If you'd said to me a year ago that record would be UK number one, no one would have predicted it, I don't think.
For like 4 weeks as well, I think. It was like a long time. It's just amazing. It's amazing. I guess that's the one thing I want to talk to you about is being at radio is like, you see, especially now, I don't know, I could be wrong, but especially now it feels like there's more records that do very well very quickly and then you don't really, the artists don't really grow a career because it's very much their first record that does really, really well. And then it's like, it feels to me, and I could be wrong, and I'd happily be wrong, but I'd like to get your kind of thoughts on that.
I think, for me, I actually think it's a product of streaming, primarily. Yeah. I think now we have hit records, we don't have hit artists.
Yeah.
I think, and TikTok has massively amplified this because, records are made and broken by TikTok now, and you can't predict it, but it could totally change the game in terms of attention on music. And I think the fact now that you don't have to buy an album, you just stream the one track that you like.
Yeah.
If you like a track by an artist, all you ever need to do is stream that one track. You're never exposed to, but what else have they made? And I do think because of everything being online and so accessible, you don't need to have that kind of the machine behind you to get your record out there. Yeah. Which means you don't have to have necessarily put in the work, the years of work, the groundwork.
Totally.
To kind of get a reputation, to get to a point where radio stations will take you seriously, where labels will take you seriously. If you turn up to a major label now and say, I've got 100 million views on TikTok, then there's a good chance that they'll offer you a fat deal, and that's your that's it. There's a hit record there, and that doesn't breed artists. That breeds
hit
tracks.
Records.
I think I try and kind of stay clear of judgment on that. I think long term, it's probably not healthy for the music industry because whilst anyone can be an artist now, it kind of lowers the threshold of what the quality of music needs to be. But also, it opens doors to everyone, and it kind of makes that whole marketplace just a bit more free and open to people who didn't have access to the same kind of level of prep work and behind the scenes stuff that you needed originally to kind of get that far. I
think I totally agree with you. I do judge it a little bit. If I'd be lying if I didn't, because I think it's, for me, more so it's sad to see where the major labels are doing what they've always done, and that's kind of take advantage of the artist and make a fuck ton of money out of the artist, and then say goodbye to the artist onto the next record. Yeah. And realistically, like, yes, they're throwing out big deals, but they're not big deals for the majors. Like, if a major's paying like 150 grand for a record, in a grand scheme of things, 150 grand for a major record label is literally like change.
Yeah, they make that in a day from
Beyonce
Beatles catalog that they own.
Exactly. Like, so it's like, I think, and 150 grand isn't gonna create an artist's career, because we all know, like, you get a bunch of money when you're 21 years old and you're like, sick, like, this is gonna come every time, and then it doesn't. So I think it's a great time for dance music, but I think it's also a very bad time for growing artists' careers. You then look at Fred again, who has changed dance culture and
sure.
in the last 2 years to a certain extent, but definitely within the last year, it's changed massively, and he's opened the world to a completely different fan, I think. And it's really interesting with his background and everything like that, like with his pop, like he wrote the last 2 Ed Sheeran records. He's been one of the biggest pop writers in the world for the last 5-6 years. He's done some huge records.
I think he's an example of having that artistry background and doing your time, you know, totally. Having been an exceptional producer in the behind the scenes world. Yeah. Kind of worked with the best people around, and that has obviously then skyrocketed his career. Yeah. But he's able to deliver now as a headline artist himself, because he's done the time. He knows what he's doing. He's kind of put the hours in. Well, I think this is not to kind of slate new artists that come along.
No, not at all.
You know, I'm a massive fan of new artists. I'm always looking, to support new artists on radio and at the label and everything. But I think you can tell when someone has done their shift.
Yeah, I think for me though, it's also like the confidence in how he releases music, and the not every record, like, this is purely opinion, and I wouldn't want to offend somebody, but not every record he puts out is good. But it doesn't matter, because there's another good record to come, and I think that's the confidence in how they release music as
putting stuff out once a week, or just kind of at weird times, just with no warning, like, oh, here's another one, here's another one, and that doesn't fit. And I think that's been really interesting to watch as a bit of a case study of kind of the music industry, because we generally work quite cyclically on kind of release cycles, and we'd work this release for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever, then we'll do another one, and then we'll kind of do it quite systematically. But he's come along and kind of just thrown that out of the window a little bit, and I think that's been really interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting to see somebody do that on an independent level. Yeah. And see how that would be different, because obviously they've got Warner behind them, so like having a big major label really massively helps. Yeah. But then I guess like you look at the streams, and the streams do really well, but for a major, like, the streams aren't massive, if you know what I mean, for a major release. Like, for anybody listening, like, if a record's signed to a major and it hasn't done like 60 million streams, it's not doing well, if you know what I mean. Obviously on an independent level, even if you get to 1 million streams, you're fucking laughing. But like,
major is Beyonce levels, so that's the kind of thing they're looking for.
How do you, let's put A&R hat on. I guess we've been talking A&R and radio realistically, but how do you manage or monitor the success of a record as an A&R, or a record and an artist?
Okay, this is a difficult one. There's lots of different ways, and I think, so I'm an A&R at Armada, which is an independent label, but it's a big independent label. Yeah. So ultimately, we have a different goal for a record than what, say, like a small bedroom label or like an artist label has from a record, in that we're still very much in the business of releasing music, as opposed to in the passion of releasing music. We have staff and offices and bills that kind of need to be paid out of that. So whilst we're definitely very different to a major, we're also different to your label, for example.
Yeah, you're like a major indie.
Yeah. Really? So there's different ways that we kind of look for success. I think, you can have a different type of a hit record. You can have a radio hit. Yeah. You can have a streaming hit. Some of the biggest records on streaming have never been played on the radio.
Yeah, it's mad.
It's just mad. Crazy. And I think that's for me is both interesting and can sometimes be incredibly frustrating. Yeah. When the difference between now the streaming world and the radio world is huge. Yeah. And that in the past has kind of made hits. If you hear it on the radio and then you buy it in the shop, or you see it on the storefront, or it's number one in various charts to do with buying or sales or streaming, then then that combines to create a lot of awareness around a record, and you get a hit record.
Yeah.
These days, so often you get one or the other, or they come at different times.
Yeah.
So you might start on streaming and then you get radio, but then by that point, streaming's bored of it.
Yeah.
Or you might start on So I think these days, I think it's kind of important to look at them as different sources of success.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're talking purely financially, obviously the vast majority of revenue comes from streaming these days. But
for a record label.
For a record label, yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at it from a radio point of view, if you have a radio hit, your next records will do better on streaming as well, because the artist has more awareness around and they have more fans.
Yeah.
So I kind of like to view it as, okay, maybe this record didn't stream loads, but it got loads of key radio airplay. People are now more aware of this artist. This artist is now a higher profile act. Let's look forward to the next releases. But definitely, it's interesting kind of difference between the two.
So do you sign artists for? Obviously, it's different. But like, what is your ideal situation when you're taking on an artist? Is it, I want to sign this one record and kind of hope that it's a hit, or do you sign, okay, let's sign 5 records and take it from there?
So it all depends on the artist and what they're looking for. I think in my ideal world, I'd sign 3 to 5 records from an artist, and then we can do a journey together and we can build the campaigns into each other. We can kind of work on it as a whole project, because when you do it like that, the chances of you signing one record and it being a hit are so slim, because the amount of variables, the different the kind of ways that records break and become successful these days are so broad that A&R is a lot of it now is down to luck. And it's down to external factors that we just cannot control. So I would rather say, let's sign 5 records. We think this one might be the hit, but it could be this one, or it could be this one, and we're going to work on all of them, and we're going to see over the space of 8 months, 10 months, whatever, which one of them connects. And I think the way music works now is that if a record's doing well, there's a lot of things you can do to amplify that. But you can't make a record do well. So a record kind of getting traction off the start comes from things like radio. Does it get hottest record in the world? Does it get a track ID? That is a good launch pad to then kind of get some kind of further results, and then you can kind of build it. But if you take a record that you think is amazing, but it doesn't really get much radio, doesn't get any streaming playlists, you're in a very difficult position. And there comes a point when you're like, okay, well, maybe we should sort of cut our losses a little bit on this one and work on the next record. Because if you don't get some kind of organic growth and support on launch, or within a relatively small time frame of release, then there's not a lot you can do for a full campaign. And sometimes now these days with streaming, a record might pick up 3 years after release, but by that point the artist has moved on. They've released 2 albums since then. They're not interested in working on this record they did 3 years ago. Their sound's probably changed. So that kind of creates some really weird situations where
you hit the nail on the head when you said having a big record is mostly luck. And I think it always has been to a certain extent, but I think you could, if your record was very good, it would always shine through. Whereas now it is, for me personally, it's not based on how good your record is. It's to a certain extent. And I think it just goes to show, like, I remember when I first started to go to Ibiza, it was always there's be a record of the summer. And those records were like every DJ played them. And it wasn't a case of like people not wanting to play them. It was a case of everyone had to play that record. And you'd hear that record 4 or 5 times in a night. It's the industry's changed so much in that sense. And I'm not being a Debbie Downer and saying it's wrong. It's just changed, and that's absolutely fine. But I think the amount of big records at one time is crazy now because you can have like 10 big records that are all doing really well at the same time.
Yeah.
You just don't have that one record. I think the last one record was probably Camel Fat Cola.
Yeah, that was because that lasted a season, a whole season. Even kind of after that, records didn't last. They lasted half a season. The year with Joys and Switch, you know, they were kind of the third.
Which record's that?
The Defected one.
Oh, the thingy Sriracha.
Yes, Roberto Sriracha, Joys.
Yeah.
That kind of occupied the second half of that season. Before that, it was Janssens and Switch, which was the kind of first half of that season. I can't remember what years. It's probably 3-4 years ago now. 4 years ago, I reckon.
I guess Losing It Fish was pretty big.
That was big as well.
But I still don't think it like globally had the scale of what Camel Fat's Cola had.
Yeah, I think that was Losing It was always a club record, right? It was a DJ record.
Yeah.
Camel Fat Cola worked as a pop record.
Yeah.
It just worked as a kind of easy listening track as well, which you know very few records do. Although arguably quite a few of the Camel Fat ones do. They're really good at making records that work amazingly in a club, but also sound great on radio.
Yeah.
And it's different. Generally speaking, it's a totally different record. And very few records actually do tick both those boxes.
Yeah, it's really hard. I guess the last one that I can remember is that's done both boxes is the LF System record this year. Yeah. Afraid to Feel, I think. Yeah. Like that. But realistically, it's a disco record.
Yeah.
Which I get why your fucking mum wants to listen to it because it was like of their time, right? They were listening to that music when they growing up. So yeah, it makes complete sense why that. Let's go on to samples.
Cool.
Because I think it's like a nice segue, especially now. Samples has always been huge in house music. The whole point of house music is sampling. All right, let's go a bit more controversial. People have got really bad. This is my opinion. People have got really lazy with sampling in the last.
So lazy.
In the last since COVID.
So lazy.
Since COVID, and it's very much based on. For me, it feels like what do I have to do to make a big record? And it's, okay, let's get a fucking Kylie Minogue single and put a beat on it.
That's a big part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look at what was the Do It To It record.
Yeah, but I think I think the difference with the Acraze record, it was done very well.
Yeah.
It was done really tastefully, and a lot of people didn't necessarily know the original sample.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I struggle with the most is when it's like a straight up massive record sample.
Yeah.
And then it kind of blows up. Like, I've done it as bootlegs, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I do bootlegs. I do things like that, which is great. But for me, that was just like, it was always just a tool. How do you kind of A&R things like that? Because you're clearly getting them and you're clearly releasing them, right? Because they do well.
Yeah. You get the right sample record, particularly in house, tech house. You know, that's really the genre where sampling, like kind of vocal sampling, is prevalent. Well, firstly, it's a pain in the ass for a label perspective,
massively,
because when you work when you're at a bigger label like Armada, you know, we have to do everything by the book, which means we have to get legal clearance to use a sample or use the publishing of the sample, so we have to get the sample replayed, which is where you get someone to re-sing the vocal that are sounding as close to the original as they can make it, it not being the original recording. And so it's a pain to work with samples from a label perspective. I, as a rule, try to always favour original music over samples, just from personal preference. When I'm signing releases, I think I sign a lot of kind of more melodic stuff and you know, slightly more euphoric stuff that generally relies a little less on samples. But sometimes you just hear a record and you think that sample has been really well used, and I know what sample it is, and I know where it's from, and I know it's going to be a nightmare to clear. But it's just the game, and it's an interesting market because it ultimately kills a lot of records. So I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning him. I had tried to sign a Richie Blacker record, which had a massive sample in. I'm not going to say which one, but it was really tastefully done. It was beautifully put together. You would never have guessed that it could work, but it just worked really well. And tried to get it cleared, tried to get it approved by the original rights holder, and they just weren't having any of it. Just didn't like it, and we tried again, and they were just like, nah, don't like it, don't like the way you've done it, and just not going to clear it. So I've got on my hard drive this incredible record that will never see the light of day because it's a sample. But then I guess you get to the question of like, sometimes tracks need familiar samples to kind of give them a new life, and that's what makes the track. And
I'm all for sampling. I fucking sampled Depeche Mode. Well, I remixed Depeche Mode. Like I'm like my biggest Hallelujah, my biggest record is a sample. I think for me, and like I just think it just needs to be done tastefully. And I do think like sample something. If you're gonna sample a hit record, do it in a way where it's not super bait.
Don't use the main hook.
Exactly.
Use another part. Use another part. Like that it can be something as simple as that kind of takes it away from being just another bootleg. Like because there are so many bootlegs. And like especially from a radio point of view, every time something goes big, Squid Game was the last one. Where I just got sent, I probably had 50 bootlegs sent to me of Squid Game, and I was just like, come on, like it's lazy. I get it. It's you want to do something current because it's quick and easy, and you can make a track in a day and put it online, and people will hear it. Like so, I understand that that's the driver of this. It's not that.
Well, it's that quick. Is that quick success? And I think this is the thing: is that it's going back to. It's like, okay, what do we need to do to then get to a bigger audience, and then which means that we get to a bigger audience, which means that we're going to sell more tickets, which means realistically we make more money. And I think, and then is that going to last? So we'll have to do that more regularly and things like that. And I think you don't see Chemical Brothers do that.
No. But you don't see a lot of kind of a lot of the ultra successful, more credible. I hate to say that word because it sounds a bit kind of
dicky, but
bit wanky, like. But you don't see Camel Fat bootlegging TikTok stuff, like. And I know we mentioned them earlier on, like. But I think is an interesting point is you mentioned the live shows and the tickets, and even still now, what I think, particularly the last year or so, I've really noticed is that tickets and streaming aren't connected anymore.
Not one bit.
Not one bit. And like in the same way radio and streaming are not connected, tickets and streaming are not connected. And you have artists who have a massive live following, but they don't really have hits. Like, and equally you have these breakout artists that have these breakout hits, and it's a hit record rather than a hit artist, and they might get gigs for a year. They might tour off the back of a record for a year, and good luck to them. And they do, obviously it's a big part of what they want from that thing.
Totally.
But it doesn't mean you necessarily have fans. It doesn't mean that you're going to have a long bookings career. Off the back of one record. And you can kind of point to a couple of like anomalies in that. Like, so Ben Hemsley, for example, I think is got one of the strongest touring followings at the moment of a kind of newish artist. Bear in mind that he's only kind of been around for not that long. He sells out massive shows, and he's had some big records. But if you compare that to the average artist right now, they don't have that kind of core data, like fan base.
So how do you think you should? How do you turn into a ticket seller?
I wish I knew, otherwise I'd be doing it myself. I think, honestly, what I've seen through people like Ben Hemsley, Hannah Lang's another great example, is up north, local following is a big thing.
Yeah, it's not a thing down south.
No, maybe Bristol, maybe, but like. No, okay, fine, yeah. It's not.
Unless you're like, realistically, like, I think out of Bristol, and obviously I'm from around that area, but like the last person to have that cult following was that Eats Everything.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
it's nothing like it is up north. It's nothing like it is in Scotland. It's nothing like it is in Ireland. Like they just love their people.
They want their own people to be successful, which I think in certainly in London, you see someone near you being successful, and it's like, oh right, well,
fuck off.
I'm not going to go to that show.
Yeah, it's like
it just feels like that's the approach.
It's tall poppy syndrome, right? It's like you don't. It's really weird, but it's like people don't want people to be more successful than them. Where it's like
people like your success up to a certain point, and then it's okay. Well, hold on a minute. We don't want them to be too successful.
Yeah, and it's really weird to me that it's really weird. Sure. Like, but I think you're right. And I think for me, for example, it's like it's why America's always been so good for me. It's like they want people to be successful. They support people. Yeah, and it's like it's not about who you know. It's not about the people around you. It's just about you just do good shit, and people, if you do good shit, people will follow you. Yeah. It's really, but yeah, I think you're right. It's like Hannah, like she's fucking killing, and it's so nice to see. Yeah. And it's like, there's even like, look at Amara, if you know what I mean, with like what she's doing. And it's like, realistically, you don't even have to release music. Like she's released, her first release was a remix of Me. Her second release was a release on Trick. And then her third release was a record with me recently. Yeah. And like, she's touring more than most people in the UK. Yeah. It's amazing. It's it. If you get, and I think if you can kind of come out of your local promoter scene, that can be a big part of it. Like for me, I went to uni in Nottingham. I was DJing loads up there. Yeah. I stayed on an extra year and just kind of just played gigs and stuff up there for a bit. Yeah. And I knew all the promoters. I worked with all of them. I kind of was always working. Moved down to London, didn't know any of the promoters, and even to this day, like, I'm now 10 years on 8 years on in London. I still don't really know the London promoter landscape that well. And I still play less hometown gigs in London than I ever played when I was in Nottingham. And I think that's maybe, London's maybe kind of not your typical example because it's just so big and it's such a different market. But like, if you can build like a kind of core audience in your hometown, for me, that's the closest thing you can get to fans at an early stage. If you can get regular bookings, places, because you will kind of get that support, and then you'll get bookings in the town next door or the city kind of down the road, and you can spread it from there. And I think, but that's definitely more of a thing up north. It way definitely more. Is. I think also it's like the crew you have around you. It's like no disrespect to, but me growing up, like I was never like the cool kid. And I was never like, my mates were never the cool kids, if you know what I mean. Like we didn't have, I grew up in the fucking middle of nowhere. Like it was like, it was literally like, you can't get to school in time because they're moving the cows. So it's like, I see a lot of the people that have success in certain regions is they have like this core crew of people that are just like so into what they do, and like they're all their best mates. And then what happens is like they want everyone to be successful, so everyone will promote everything for you. And I think that's so important, having a crew, and it's like having core fans. And I think this is what I think the industry is going to turn into. I hope the industry turns into in the next 5 to 10 years, where it goes very, like, a lot more personable. Yeah. But you're not worried about hundreds and thousands of followers. You're worried about 5,000 followers that all will come to a gig and all will share every single record and will buy every single bit of merch. Like, Imagine you had 500 followers that bought every single bit of merch. Yeah. You put and streamed every record on repeat. Yeah, and it's worth a hell of a lot more than kind of someone who listens once because they saw it on online. Exactly. Yeah. I think it's the way that I'm trying to move things with my team is like, it's not about pure numbers on a global scale. It's like, okay, how can we sell 500 tickets in each market, and what do we need to do to sell that? And then you grow from there. And then it's like, okay, let's sell 1,000 tickets, let's sell 2,000 tickets, and you just grow that. But realistically, you have to have a core fan base. Like, really interesting. Do you know Option 4?
No.
So he's a producer, DJ, promoter he lives in Denver, and he is the reason why Denver has like such an insane music scene. Like, there's literally like 5 days a week there's shows 5 days a week, and you're like, how in like Denver, in fucking Colorado, in Denver, and you're like, this is ridiculous. And the way he started it was he moved to Denver and was like, okay, I'm gonna start throwing nights. What do I need to do? And he like built a thing called the 100 Presents. And he got like 100 necklace, like chains made. And like everybody that came to the show on a regular basis, 100 of them got put into like the club. And that then created like a bit of exclusivity, but also like each one of those people probably brought 10 people to a show.
Yeah.
And then those 10 people probably brought 2 people to a show. And it just kind of snowballs. And I think that's where we used to be with scenes in, like, I remember growing up around Bristol and like going to clubs, and like it wasn't about the headliner, it was about the night. Like, I know I'm going to Timbuktu on a Saturday night because it's the first Saturday of the month, and I know it's going to be a banger, and I know it's going to be packed. And I think as headline culture kind of came in a lot more, and festivals kind of took over, and DJ fees went up, it's now way more about like, you have to sell a shit ton of tickets, and the promoter's not really a promoter anymore. It's more so a promoter is just booking the artist, and they do a huge amount of promotion in some cases, but also it's like, who can we book that's going to sell them?
Guaranteed to sell tickets.
Yeah, and it will make sure that our socials look banging. We sell out, so we can boast about it selling out, and then it creates a demand for next time.
Yeah, for sure.
When you're kind of working as a record label A&R, do you look at an artist's fan base? Do you look at growing that? Do you look at working to grow that? Like, how does that work in artist development? Because obviously if you're signing just a single, no, it doesn't fucking matter. You just sign a single. But if you're signing an artist for like 5 to 8 records, that's over a year, that's over 2 years. And then you generally always have an option after that. So that might mean that you're probably signing 10 records in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. One record is just not it's not that significant for a release. Obviously it's nice to have them, for the artist to already have that following. But when you're trying to develop an artist, it comes back to what we said about the kind of the smaller number of core fans. The people that will buy a ticket for your show is less numerically than the people that will stream a song. Yeah. But if you are a key fan of an artist, you will stream that song 10 times, 20 times. You'll save it. You never skip it. Yeah. These are all important metrics for a record label. So when we're working longer term on an artist, it's really important that we can kind of do whatever we can to support that. Their kind of live thing, because it's just a huge part of a cohesive artist. And we talked about how less and less gigs, streaming, radio all come hand in hand, but the dream is still to have all of those 3 things. Like, if you can be an artist that has gigs, streaming, radio, you're ticking all the boxes, and you're more valuable to everyone who works with you. In a kind of, because it's exposure for your music that you're making, exposure for the new releases, it's exposure to new fans always as well, because any gig you play, there will be fans that are not there to see you most of the time. So you can play your music to someone who's never heard of you before, or might not know you before. Because if you're supporting a headliner, for example, but they might see your set and be like, oh, that was the best set of the night. Then they're a fan on the music as well. And equally, like, radio wants to know what else is going on for an artist. Totally. They don't just want to see streaming data. They want to see, oh, is he playing any festivals? Is she playing, this gig here and there? Like, So it all kind of feeds in, and definitely we want it to be a cohesive thing. That said, it is difficult from a label's perspective to engineer bookings, and very few labels actually have that power. Now you've got kind of obvious ones like Defected and Anjuna.
Yeah.
Have got like this amazing infrastructure where they have the record label, and it's kind of supported by just events around the world.
Yeah.
And their artists can play the events, they can premiere their new music there. Armada, Armin van Buren has it with A State of Trance.
Yeah.
It's a little ecosystem where you can just launch, grow, and kind of capitalize on music and artists from every angle.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, though, record labels don't have that full kind of package of infrastructure, and I think especially when artists come to Armada, because we're a bigger label, that I always get asked, "Oh, right, what can you do for gigs?"
Yeah.
And it's a difficult one because the short answer is not a lot.
Yeah.
like, we can give you opportunities when they come, and sometimes we do showcases and we do events, but on a smaller scale than a lot of other labels. So it's what we can do is we can help you make your music as successful as possible so that you get more bookings.
Yeah, yeah.
Does that always translate? No. Does it sometimes translate? Yeah, of course. We work with a lot of artists who we have a big record with them, and then we see there's always a little bit of a delay, but 2-3 months later, the bookings start to come in now because people are aware of the record.
Yeah.
And a good example of that is Shaq.
Yeah.
Who's just had that massive Trick One moving all around. As far as I'm aware, he wasn't a big kind of touring artist playing out in a whole lot of places before that track. It's come out now, and I'm seeing him on every lineup. And it can definitely translate, but it's not. But again, Trick is a label that has an event branch, but he's not just playing Trick events. But it is a difficult one. It's difficult for labels to have a kind of huge impact on bookings for sure.
Well, I think it's a really interesting side of the business because why is Siri coming up? Like financially, an event makes way more sense for a label, right? To kind of throw events if they're successful.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, and I know some of the big labels that run events are actually funded by the event branch.
100%.
Recorded music is hard to make money from these days. Events, if you do it right and you have a core fan base, you can make a hell of a lot of money in. At Armada, my boss, Michael, he's always said, we're a music company, we're not an event company.
Yeah.
So there's very rarely ever been Armada events. That's just the way he wants to run the company.
Yeah.
And it's a totally valid, approach to it for sure. Like, it's just different, and different businesses work in different ways. But, you can come to see some of these big labels as actually these days more event companies.
100%. Yeah. I think also is like, you have to brand your company very differently if you want to be an event. Yeah. It's not about the music. It's about what can the music do to sell tickets.
Yeah. And the two that I mentioned before, Defected and Anjuna, are great examples of labels that can sell an event without announcing a lineup.
Yeah. Because
if you want to go to a Defected event, you want to go for house music. House is a feeling. House is a spiritual thing. Like that's what you want to hear. And like, you're going to hear the same records played by different DJs. Yeah, kind of to a certain extent, not all the time. But.
No, but yeah, totally. It's you know what you're going to get. It was the same with Dirty Bird when I was signed to Dirty Bird. It was like the Dirty Bird events. You know exactly what you're going to get, and you know what artists you're going to get on there, and you know what music you're going to get. That's what people go for. I think it's just a really interesting way to like how labels grow. It's more so the label is the brand rather than the artist.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a big part of those events and there can be a conflict of interest there because the label wants to be the brand, whereas if you're an artist who wants to be a headliner selling out Wembley, you can't sit on a label lineup forever. You need to sell your own shows. Yep. And there can be a conflict of interest there.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's what happens a lot. And that's why I really respect what Jamie Jones has done with Paradise, is where he kind of stopped. He didn't take it the Hot Creations route. And it was like Paradise is a night. And Paradise is separate to Hot Creations, although it has the link to it. But I think it was a fucking clever way to not lock in. Like, if you're signed to Hot Creations, you're not necessarily playing Paradise.
Yeah.
And if you're playing Paradise, you're not necessarily signed to Hot Creations.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of, it takes out the politics.
Yeah.
Of the label. Like, we all know, like, those label nights don't pay the artists as well. It's everyone knows that, because they don't need to. If you know what I mean, they can put anybody on and it doesn't matter because they've sold the tickets already.
Yeah.
Which then creates a really interesting relationship between the artist and the label. And then if the label's owned by a big DJ, that's when it gets even more.
Yeah.
Even more. I've seen it with Dynamics, where like there's artists that are way bigger than the head of the label, but the head of the label still puts them headline in the shows. And you're just like, what is this? Is this an ego contest, or is this?
Yeah, there's so much politics.
Yeah.
So much politics in all of it. And to a certain extent, I do quite enjoy the fact that, you know, in my work life with Armada, we're kind of not involved in that.
Yeah.
It does make it a little easier on that front, just to talk, hey, let's sign your music because I believe in the record.
Yeah.
Don't come to me because you want gigs, because I can't get that for you. I can try and help, but I can't promise you it. Come to me because you've got a wicked record or 5 wicked records, and we want to work them, and there's, you know, we want to grow your kind of releasing career, and that will in turn help with the gigs and stuff. But for sure, it's a minefield out there.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting time. I want to talk 2023 a little bit. I know we're in we're not in January, but this is coming out in January. But I want to, like, what's your approach on how do you plan a year's worth of releases? Because from what I gather, like, how many releases are you releasing a year, and how many, like, how far in advance, and how do you work that in advance when it's like, oh shit, like, we need 24 records, and like, you can't just sign them willy-nilly. You have to see records, and you have to live with them, and you have to believe in them, and things like that.
So in terms of the label, when we're signing records, I know now the kind of 4 artists of my roster that have all got multiple singles that we'll be releasing over the next 6 months, and they're all kind of loosely penciled into a schedule. Yeah. Everything is subject to change. Yeah. The order might change. The records might change. You know, if a track blows up, then we'll push everything back. But we all the A&Rs have got kind of a loose idea of what's coming. Yeah. But there are gaps. There has to be gaps in the schedule, because sometimes stuff comes out of nowhere. Yeah. And the fact is, as we talked about earlier, you can produce a record in a day and it could be a hit. Yeah. You know, you and Vicar may tell me something good in an hour. Yeah. Like, and then if we just said, all right, well, this is us done for 6 months, like, and you didn't kind of be reactive to stuff. Yeah. You know, it just wouldn't work. So I like to have an idea of what artists I'm gonna be working on and what we're gonna be working on. But, you know, it has to be flexible. Yeah. And that's the nice thing about being an independent label, is we can be flexible. Yeah. We can just move stuff. Yeah. Like, we can just move it to make it fit, and we can do it easily. Yeah. And that, you know, that is a blessing. And we can do it to suit the artists that we work with. Like, obviously, you know, it still takes time. We plan our releases 6 weeks ahead of release. Yeah. So we schedule our releases. We lock it in 6 weeks ahead of release. Mm-hmm. And then it goes through various stages. It gets pitched to all the DSPs. We get all the marketing kind of stuff done, all the assets made. And that happens over the course of 6 weeks. But the quickest from signing the contract to getting a record out is 6 weeks. Because it takes that time to set a record up properly. Yeah. The difference, or the only kind of time where that's different is, and this applies much less to like Armada, but to a major, is when they're upstreaming records. Yeah. When they're just picking up a record is already doing well on another label, and a major comes in and basically buys the rights to it, and that can just happen pretty quickly and be online overnight. But when you're setting up a record from start, you know, in an ideal world, we'll have a record out on DJ promo. If it's a club record, we'll have it out 3 months in advance.
Yeah.
Especially if it's over summer.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have a record being played in clubs across Ibiza, across festivals, for 3, 4, 5 months, and then getting released.
Totally.
You know, the great example of that was Matt Guy and Set My Mind Free. That was played everywhere across Ibiza, every festival, every club, all summer long. And then when it finally got released, you know, it was set up amazingly, and everyone had heard it somewhere. And that was a great position to be in with that record. And you know, I'm talking club music here specifically, but it takes time to get a record. So we like to talk in 2023. It's nice to have an idea of what's going to happen. Yeah. And I already know kind of the records that I think we want to get out early on club promo and stuff. But you also have to be a bit flexible.
Yeah. Who have we got coming up record-wise? Are we not allowed to talk about that?
I'm sure we can talk about it. I've got a load of singles with Tommy Farrow.
Oh, cool. Tommy's like my homie.
Mate, he's wicked. He's such a talented guy. Yeah. I think, you know, big things to come from him. And yeah, he's got some...
It's very much your tip as well on the more proggy kind of melodic vibe.
Yeah, so really excited about him for the next few months.
That makes me happy. I'm happy about that.
Richie Blacker, got 4 singles coming with him, and they're all really cool. Totally kind of bit weird and wonky, weird and wonderful. Very different
I've not heard of him before.
Okay, he's an Irish producer. I'll send you some stuff. Please really, really good producer. Archie.
Yeah, he's wicked.
Who obviously has worked with like Christoph and stuff. Yeah, he's a real talent, and I've got a couple of amazing singles from him.
Amazing.
I'm trying to think if I've forgotten anyone now. Oh, Ben Hemsley. More with Ben.
I see. Do you guys do a lot with Ben?
We did the last single. We've got another one coming.
Yeah.
And you know, he's obviously moving into this nostalgic trance Balearic sound, and Armada being kind of the trance label. Is, you know, we've got a lot of catalog stuff and alignment with him, and a lot of infrastructure to work that trance stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Because, you know, most UK labels, and Juno being kind of the exception, aren't set up to work trance releases. No. Because it's not a major genre here in the UK anymore. But that feels like it could be changing. It certainly feels like it's infiltrating all the different genres. They're all getting those.
Mate, let's be honest. Everything's just trance, but it's like just packaged differently. Like
everything is trance.
Yeah, and it's like all the big records. Like, look at fucking Tale of Us. It's trance.
It's trance,
but slowed down. Like, come on, it's Funeral House. It's like, it's just the differences. And who's the American guy at Armada? I forgot his name.
The
gay guy.
Tanner.
I was with him the other day, and we were talking about trance, and like, he was like, it's really hard for trance to be popular again.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's not. It just needs to be packaged correctly.
Definitely.
And the branding needs to be correct. And it's like, there's a lot of old trance guys that aren't doing as well as they were back in the day. And my view on it is purely it's because they don't have people around them that are telling them that they have to stop doing what they were doing and marketing the same way as what they used to. Go do something cool. Like, go do a collab with fucking Tale of Us. Go do a collab with somebody cool and completely rebrand yourself. Look at how Camel Fat's done it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Look at how Camel Fat's gone from Cola to like playing with Tale of Us. Afterlife. And like, it's all trance. It's just packaged and branded so differently. They just need everyone that wants to be cool in that world that still is saying they are trance DJs just need to go and brand themselves in the right way. Go hire. They've all got money. Go pay a branding team to fucking do a good job.
For sure, it's such a thing. When I joined Armada, this is 4 years ago. This is kind of the Afterlife stuff was very much there, but it was nowhere near the size that it is now. When I joined Armada, we had all these conversations about trance being this dirty word and like it's kind of us needing to hide from trance and kind of push other angles. But in between now and then, that's changed massively, and kind of people have started to just admit that melodic techno is just trance, and like it's there's some changed elements, but house has changed in the last 20 years. Like, and then interestingly, I thought when Ben Hemsley kind of came along and said, "I'm making trance now," he was the first house and techno guy to kind of publicly acknowledge and claim the word trance. Because before that, it still had, particularly in house and techno, you had the melodic techno guys maybe acknowledging it was a little bit trance, but the house and techno guys were still, trance is old, it's lame, it's not a thing.
Yeah.
Now, all the genres are fusing together. Those influences, nostalgia is becoming a genre in itself, like kind of ravey stabs, synths, trancey synths, like those are things that are just kind of creeping into mainstream dance music now on every level, on every genre. Like, so it's definitely trance is back for sure.
Trance is back. It's just not called trance.
Exactly.
It's just like people's egos they're just not willing to go there yet. It will change, like, and then trance will become a dirty word again in 10 years' time. Like, it's just how fashion is. Tech house is the EDM of EDM.
Yeah, tech house is a dirty word these days.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, the tech house that's tech house now isn't even tech house. If you listen to like tech house back in the day, that was techno and house. Like, it was that. Where this isn't. This is just formulaic music now. If you know what I mean, you know what's going to happen. And I think you're right. Like, genres are kind of all coming together because headliners are all coming together. Everyone's so close to each other now. It's like when you have Black Coffee doing a record with David Guetta, you have the Kind in Music crew writing records for Drake. You have Gordo writing an album for Drake. You have Beyonce getting produced by Green Velvet. Like, it's all just like one, which is fucking amazing. It is
super exciting.
It's really good. It's a really interesting time. Like, don't get me wrong, you get some really shit records that come through that do really well, and you're like, how the fuck did that happen? But still, it's like, yeah, it's interesting, and I think that's the thing, is like, it goes back to how it was, where it's like people just throwing shit at the wall and just seeing what sticks.
Yeah, but I think also, technology, but equally, I also think that COVID kind of made people just say, well, let's just try this and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I think this was already happening before COVID, so COVID is not kind of the cause of this stuff. But having a little bit of time off touring definitely made artists go, well, it doesn't really matter if that's not what I usually make. Let me just try it and see, because I've got time. I don't disagree, but I think also what's happened is, out of COVID, you have this new wave of artists. Yeah, definitely. That they don't have the rules that we were kind of set in, that we had to do this or we had to do that. And we didn't have to, but like, realistically, as the music business, for us to get shows, for us to do that, we had to do a certain thing, and we had to be kind of, you're in your lane. Where like now it's like those lanes are blurred, and also the way streaming, the way TikTok changed the industry over COVID. Realistically, no one used TikTok before COVID. In the grand scheme of things, no one used Twitch in our industry during COVID. No one streamed live during COVID. Like, before COVID, really, it was always like Circle, it was Boiler Room or something like that. It was never how it was done during COVID. So I think like there's just a lot. I think what you've got now is you've got younger people in the scene that haven't been making music for as long, that aren't necessarily worried about making stuff that you should make, and they're just chucking shit at the wall and seeing what works, and some of it works. Sure. And I think also kind of over that period of COVID, the notion of self-releasing became bigger and bigger than it's ever been before. Like the traditional route that, I'm sure you were kind of always not told, but like you just kind of absorb on the way, was you make records that kind of sound like they fit on specific labels, so that you can tick off that label and you can build your career. And nowadays, you don't need to make records for labels. No. You make records for whatever you want. You make what you feel. You make how it sounds. And I think a lot of people would counter what I just said and say, no, you should never make records to sound what labels want. And I understand that. That's everyone. True artistry is kind of creating something unique and different. But in electronic music, you know, people made records for labels.
Yep.
I want to get on Defected. I want to get on Tool Room. Like, I'm going to make a Tool Room records. Like, and I do feel like there's less of that now.
100%, which I'm happy for.
Yeah,
because it allows people to be true artists to themselves.
Yeah.
And it stops the whole it doesn't stop every record sounding the same, but it stops part of that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting, you mentioned a kind of new wave of artists, and I think this also feeds a little bit into what we said about being the full package of an artist. And certainly COVID, the 2.5 years out of touring and stuff, changed the artist market totally.
Yeah.
Like the artists that we release on Armada now it's almost like a full clean sweep from the roster that we had pre-COVID. And the hype names, you know, even that sounds a bit cringy to say it, but like the hype names that are getting support on radio and getting support on Spotify are totally different to what they were before. What hasn't changed though is the touring. Yeah. So that feeds into this difference between touring and streaming and radio, because touring takes a long time to build up a touring audience. Like it does. It really does. And you can only do that by playing show after show, playing festival after festival. And, you know, it's not easy. You can learn to produce in a year, make a hit record now.
Especially nowadays, like it's so the tools that you have are so easy to make.
So
records.
Easy.
Yeah.
And that's changed it. What was really interesting and quite eye-opening for me is I ran an event at Egg right when clubs reopened. Yeah. I booked 2 guys, the hype names, who are wicked producers, wicked artists that kind of had emerged in COVID times. And I was like, these guys are wicked. I want to have them on the lineup with me. Yeah. And I found out on the night of the event, both of them, it was their second ever gig. Yeah. And it blew my mind, because I was like, what? But you've had so much success. You've had all this airplay. You've had all this streaming. You've had loads of support, and you're wickedly talented. But then you just haven't lived the normal. Your talent has emerged in the last 3 years where we've not had a normal industry.
That's happened so often.
Yeah.
So often. I've had Joplin on the podcast. Well, it's out today, but it would have been out about a month ago. But yeah, like, and she's like, I won't say her age, but she's young, and she was very young when she had her first bit of success during COVID. And you're just like, and then like her first shows are like supporting Damien Lazarus and playing to Loom and playing this, and you're like, fuck, like I couldn't even imagine that pressure. It was the same with Amy, right? With Amy L. Like when she was on the podcast and spoke about it, it's like her first show was out of lockdown, and she was like playing like with Fatboy Slim, Hot Since '82, doing all of this, and it's like
it's tough, because it's very different DJing in your bedroom to DJing in a club, and there's so many horrible factors about DJing in a club that you just can't anticipate. You get horrible audio bounce back off the hard surfaces in a club. It's too loud. You can't hear your headphones. Speakers broken. Your monitors aren't working. Stuff goes wrong all the time. Like, it's such a different experience. Yeah. And I feel, I think must be really, really nerve-wracking having emerged as a producer to then be kind of booked straight away on like, because playing a festival gig is totally different to playing a club and 100%. Stuff. Like, these are things that you wouldn't necessarily have picked up on from just making a wicked record at home.
I think this is the thing, is like it also changes the whole DJ culture, and I'm not saying what I prefer. I don't know what I prefer, but I know it takes a long time to become a producer, and it takes a long time to become a good DJ. It doesn't take long to make a hit record, because it's all luck. Not all of it, but a lot of it's luck. So it's like you're kind of thrown at the deep end, which then goes back to that, like the boy band kind of and the girl band days, where it's like you're just so naive to like everything, and then it's like you question, is it actually what you want? Is what I'm doing exactly what I want? And I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of artists. Well, I've seen, I don't want to mention any names, but like where you have an artist that has a really big hit record, and then doesn't release on that record label ever again, or doesn't want to release that music. And it's like, it must be mentally, that must be tough.
Yeah, for sure. Because a lot of the time, if a record becomes a hit, it kind of has become a beast that you didn't intend it to be, and you didn't necessarily, club DJs are not the same as pop artists who go around and sit with radio hosts on breakfast shows and chat about the record. It's a different lifestyle. It's a different approach to things. But we're now in a situation which is strange and brilliant that dance music is crossing into the mainstream, right?
Again,
I want to make that clear. I'm not like saying it's not, because I love the fact that the music that we love is now heard by even more people and can be appreciated by that.
Yeah.
But I do understand it from an artist perspective. If you thought a track would do well, but then it goes beyond well and it becomes this monster, it can kind of become like disassociated from what you want to do, and it puts you in an interesting position as an artist. Do I embrace this success I'm having because I'm having success with this record? Do I make another one that's like it? Do I do all these kind of mainstream opportunities to kind of keep that success going and try and build myself as a different artist? But it probably means I need to step away from what I originally thought I wanted to make and do with my career. Or do I go hard back into my roots and kind of just put out a techno record next and like try and almost forget about that chapter? And you see it with artists a lot.
Must be tough. Must be tough, especially when it's like your first big record is.
Exactly.
That's the thing that I'm glad I haven't had a hit record. Like, and I've said this for years. Like, if I had a hit record now, it'd be good, because I know that I have the team around me.
And you've done the work.
I've done it, and it's not for me. It's not even about doing the work. It's like I have the experience where like I know that I could probably handle a level of success that will then turn into something even bigger.
Yeah.
And we have the infrastructure and the foundations that it will turn into something bigger from then. Whereas I feel like a lot of what's happening now with what we were going back to at the beginning with, it's not expected.
No.
Which it never is. A hit record's never expected. But it's like, I think, like, let's say, for instance, with Camel Fat, and I know we've talked about them a lot, but they had been touring for years. They'd done lots for a long time as Camel Fat. They had the foundations, and look at where it's grown. But, like, there's not been a single artist in the last 2 years that's had a hit. Well, John Summit.
Yeah.
He's
probably the best example.
John's probably the best example of that, where it's kind of turned into something way bigger. Dom Dollar as well.
Yeah, but I don't know enough about what was going on in the US around him before the hits.
John, nothing.
Really?
John, nothing. Yeah. John was a resident in Chicago, just doing resident stuff. But I think John's very different as well.
He's a character. Yeah. He is there's so much to get your teeth into with John Summit as a project. Like, whether you just follow him on Instagram for the entertainment value, you don't even have to be a fan of the music, but you still know who John Summit is. And that adds a different dimension. And that, I mean, we could go down a proper rabbit hole here on like, what is an artist in 2022-3? Like, is it a musician? Is it a performer? Is it, do you know what I mean?
I think quintessentially is everything, right? It's like John has the perfect, for me, Dom Dollar has the perfect kind of balance. Where it's partly character, partly very credible music, and it's his music does very well.
Yeah,
and I think it's music driven, but it's also character driven or personality driven, and then that kind of carries on with everything else.
But I think it's only in pretty niche electronic sounds now where you can be that original kind of bedroom, I don't want to speak to anyone, I don't want to be a persona thing, like
in like the lo-fi stuff, like the mile grabs, the skin on skins, things
exactly
like that. But they're the uber cool kids, and it goes back to what we were saying about up north, is like they have a crew around them that really support.
Yeah.
and they have that foundation that a lot of people don't have. So it's like, yeah, it's definitely interesting. How do you mix the radio and the A&R? Is there rules at KISS?
So KISS, there are no official rules. Now,
That's good.
like I think BBC, for example, is different. They have forms to sign and stuff if they have conflicts of interest. KISS is a commercial station. My show is monitored, my track lists are monitored. If I was playing an hour of Armada releases that I'd signed, I think I think it would get noticed. Ultimately, you know, I'm catering to a different audience there. I don't want to just play Armada releases for an hour. I want to showcase the best new electronic music. That's my job there, and that's a passion of mine. It doesn't matter whether it's signed on my label or not. Like if I think a record is wicked, I want to champion it. And, in terms of managing it actually, you know, a lot of the roster that I've now signed to Armada are artists that I first found for KISS.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I've been playing on KISS. You know, Tommy, I was really early supporter of. Same with Richie Blacker. You know, Archie, I've been playing his records for years. These guys, I play them on the radio, and I like that. That sounds wicked, and now I can sign it to the label, which, you know, is great. You know, and then I get to work with the guys because I know them through the radio show. So then I get to work with artists that I know and like at the label as well. And you know, no matter what anyone says, any part of this industry is better when you're working with people you like.
Totally.
Like, so that, you know, I really see the radio and the label as kind of complementary to each other. Yeah. And both have helped the other one for sure.
Well, I guess it's like, I don't know about you, but I guess it's your job. You have to. But like listening to promos for me is like the biggest bane of my life, if I'm honest. And I don't. And I should, but I don't.
It's interesting for me because most of my mates in this industry are DJs. They're not radio hosts. So I have this conversation with them about promos all the time because for DJs, promos is something you do when you have a show, when you have a gig. Generally, you know, I think a lot of them would like to say that they do it every Tuesday night, like religiously. But there's no reason to do promos unless you've got a gig to play them out. Yeah. Whereas I have a gig in terms of I have a radio show every week. Yeah. So I do my promos every week, and I think particularly in lockdown, that was a blessing because I was across music, whereas I know mates of mine who just didn't do promos for 6 months or a year, because what's the point? Yeah. And then you got to go and spend a day, 2 days doing promos. I'm quite brutally quick with the radio show. I can tell if I'm going to play a record within 3 seconds. Yeah. And then it's on to the next one. Yeah. And I used to do it better than I do now, but I used to kind of reply to every promo I got and just, you know, like, this is why this is right or it's why it's not right. Thanks for sending, please send more. And I'll still say, if I like something but not quite enough, I will still say, hey, can you send me more stuff? But these days it's a little bit like, I can probably do my promos in an hour and a half, 2 hours a week. There's a lot of stuff coming in. Yeah. And a lot of it, you know, straight away or 100%. Not straight away. But it's the final kind of 20% where you're like, I like this. Does it work? Quite, yeah. And one thing that I love about KISS, they've been amazing. They've always given me 100% total freedom to play whatever I want. Yeah. And I've played some weird shit on the show. And I love playing the weird shit sometimes. Yeah. But I also have to remember that most people listening to my show are in a cab on the way to a night out. Yeah. Like, that's where KISS is, you know, particularly heavily in London. That's where it's consumed. It's in cars and in house parties. So whilst I might think it's really great to play this weird atmospheric breaks, like cinematic thing, like the listener base, that's not really what they're there for. Yeah. So that's part of it as well. When I'm planning the show, I might think a track is amazing, but it just might not fit for the show. Yeah. And like, there's parameters of just, is this a going out tune? Is this going to get people hyped up? That kind of need to be considered as well. So it's not just whether I love it or not.
No, I totally agree. I hear that. Yeah, promos. I would rather spend an hour digging on Beatport for me than listening to promos. And I don't know why. I just really struggle with the whole promo thing.
Do you know? I also think, though, interestingly, for me, I'm probably more lazy with my promo, with my digging, because I get sent so much music.
That makes sense.
For radio.
That makes sense.
I you know, and this is, you know, hands up. I probably have emails that I just know I'll definitely check all these promos because I know this person. They send me good stuff every week, and I'll probably get 3 records for the show that I like out of it. Yeah, because I'm almost like subcontracting the taste making out of it sometimes.
Well, I think that's the joys of a radio plugger, right? Is that like they are good at what they do, they're good at their job, and that's how they're almost like the A&Rs of the A&Rs.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. Is like
for sure.
Or the A&Rs of the DJ world. It's like, okay, listen up, as like Jacko sent this. Like, okay, we trust it. We trust Jacko, so
for sure
it's gonna, or Christian sent it, or whatever.
Or at least it's therefore it's worth the first listen.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly. And it's like,
I do no digging through Beatport,
really,
interestingly. And that's probably something I should do more of. But by the time I've got all the people who have personally emailed me records or Instagram me records or I've found, or I'm aware of because I've heard it somewhere else, then all the stuff that's been plugged to you from a plugger. Then my mates' releases, you know, the artists that that just send me the stuff directly that I know. Yeah. Then you've got a lot of music already, and then I'm thinking, right. And also, let's be clear. I listen to other radio shows, so I'm listening to. I'm like, oh, what was that record? I want that. Like, so by the time you've done all that, you've got a lot of music to then fit into what is actually not a lot of time. Yeah. I have probably play at KISS because we have adverts, right? Which takes quite a bit of time out of the time. I probably play 25 records in a show.
Yeah, that's not much, is it? In the grand scheme of, is that over 2 hours?
Over 2 hours, yeah. And when you take into account, you've probably got between 5 and 10 repeats from last week because it's a wicked record that you want to play again.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, you're literally talking 10, 15 new records a week.
Yeah. And I used to do the show 100% brand new music every week. Yeah. But the trouble is, I want to help artists with big records make those records bigger. And so my kind of go-to rule, this is getting into the boring stuff now. My go-to rule is I'll play a record twice. Yeah. That's, if I like a record, it's good enough for the show. Yeah. It's good enough to be played twice. If it's like I love the record, or for example, I feel like I've championed it or I found it or something, then it might get 3 times. Yeah. Very, very rarely will it get 4 times.
Interesting.
And that's the way I kind of like to move through it, because there's an ecosystem with radio, right? My show is 11 p.m. till 1 a.m. The remit of my show is to find and champion the big stuff early. Yeah. Before it kind of gets passed down into the more accessible shows, the more kind of with a wider audience. And if a record gets added to the KISS playlist, for example, I don't need to play anymore. That's not my job. Yeah. Like, it's going to be played on daytime rotation. And if I hear that Madge, for example, Majestic, is playing a load of records that I was playing on my show, then I don't need to play that anymore because it's already getting played to a kind of bigger audience earlier in the evening. And, you know, a big part of what I love about KISS is we all kind of a little bit aware of what each other are playing, and we kind of send records to each other and stuff. So it's a nice ecosystem. But yeah, ultimately my remit is to find and champion new stuff.
I guess that was the question, was how does it work with KISS? Because I know how it works with Radio 1, but like, how does it work with you guys with it actually being a commercialized station? Like, how does that then, like, you champion a record for 3 weeks, it does well. How do you guys monitor it to go into daytime playlists and things like that?
So there's a hard split between your specialist shows and the daytime playlist team, in so much as the specialist presenters have 100% control over the music that they play every week. The daytime shows are all playlisted by the centralized playlisting team. to get a record on Specialist Kiss and to get a record on Kiss Playlist are two very different things, and they take very different kind of achievements and box ticks and stuff. And ultimately, we love it when a track starts in Specialist and we can recommend it to the playlist team, or it's kind of picked up some momentum, and then it gets on the playlist. That's the ideal journey, right? Because we want that to happen. But often the two are totally separate. Like a pop dance record might not have had any Specialist play, but if it's massive and it's streaming 10 million or whatever, then the Kiss Playlist team will be across it, and they'll add it on a kind of different merit. Equally though, the Kiss guys are wicked in terms of they'll take a risk on a record. They'll because we're Kiss, because we have our pirate roots. Obviously the station's been on a journey. We had a bit of a weird blip a few years back and we went really commercial and really kind of Capitol style. Now I think we're kind of back with a bit more of a identity, and we're kind of happier to take some risks. And so I've seen the guys on the playlist jump on club records really early and just say, we think this is going to work for our
audience,
listener base. And you know, that's something that I think is great and is important in radio.
Do you guys monitor like Shazams and stuff like that, or is that not something that you think about?
So me, for my show, I wouldn't monitor Shazams. But part of that is because I don't need to play records that
they're out.
They're
even Shazammable,
or that are like big on Shazam. That's not necessarily the remit of my show, but also, you know, Shazam data is a great indicator, but the amount of Shazams that I would get from a play at midnight on Kiss is probably not that obvious in the data, like, because there's so many other things going on. So if you get a primetime breakfast show play, for example, you can see a Shazam spike.
Massively.
You're not going to see a Shazam spike from me playing it at midnight. Like,
well, and also, so like the weird thing with Shazam now, since Apple buying it, is that they're not allowed. You can't Shazam records that aren't out. It's released, so stupid.
It's a nightmare.
It's so stupid.
I love Apple Music.
Same.
I think it's great, but I hate the fact that they own Shazam, and I hate that Shazam is attached to Apple Music. I wish it was this independent thing. Like they just killed it, and it's such a useful tool for the whole industry. But why can I not Shazam records that aren't released? I just why not? It's so frustrating. And also from a label point of view, often a record gets released on a Friday. Shazam doesn't work till Monday. So if you're launching a big record on Danny Howard, on Sarah Story, on Majestic, you want that instant Shazam reaction, but you won't get any Shazams because it doesn't work until Tuesday next week.
You just don't get it. It's so
counterintuitive.
It's so counterintuitive, and it's the one thing Apple are good at everything pretty much, and they fucked that. Royally fucked it. And there's other ones like Hound Dog. Have you ever used Hound Dog?
I've not.
Hound Dog's really good.
Is it the same concept?
Exactly the same.
Right.
Exactly the same. But it's a little bit better in certain genres than others. It's like a different AI. But yeah, the thing with Shazam is that it's so commercialized. If Hound Dog came out and was way bigger, like it would take over Shazam tomorrow because you can get all the same data and everything like that. It's very strange. Very strange. But mate, we've just done an hour and 40 minutes.
Flown by, mate.
Flown by. Thank you for coming on, man. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm pretty sure we could keep going for another 2 hours. How can people listen to your show to start with?
So Kiss every Friday night from 11 p.m. You can catch it on FM or in your car or on DAB or on the Kiss app. Tomorrowland's is DAB Plus and on the Tomorrowland app.
If you're in America, can you listen to Kiss at all?
I actually don't know. You'd probably have to use a VPN.
Yeah.
I think you'd have to use a VPN for Kiss. Tomorrowland you can listen to.
You can on Tomorrowland, yeah.
And
this is, might not want to give your email out, but A&R, if people want to sign records to not Anjuna, sorry, that is blasphemy. To Armada. Sorry. To Armada, how can people reach out to you and things like that? What's the best way?
Super easy. Just ping them to ben@armadamusic.com.
Cool. Wicked, mate. Hope 2023 is a good year for you.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thanks for coming on, man. It's my pleasure. And I'll see you probably pretty soon, I would have thought.
Looking forward to it.
Keep safe, mate. See you in a bit.
See you later.
And that is a wrap. Big love to everybody that listened. Thanks for Ben for coming on. Keep safe. Give us a review. Subscribe.